When you care about current affairs, it's on the Oshow.
Welcome to the Oshow, Canada's pro-democracy podcast. I'm your host, Laura Babcock, and I want to thank our listeners around the globe for listening and supporting Canada in this critical moment for our sovereignty and for democracy globally. I want to thank all of you on YouTube, all the new subscribers. By subscribing, you push the algorithms to this pro-democracy conversation, which is so important because one of the things we're going to talk about today on the Mighty Scandal panel is foreign-owned media pretending, masquerading to be Canadian media, and the propaganda that is flying into our country this week, trying to push annexation and to, downplay Carney's trip to China. We'll get into all of that, but your subscriptions make a humongous difference. Welcome back, guys. Keith Leslie, he is a reporter extraordinaire, now living on the East Coast, and Mark Cripps, he was a former journalist and also worked in the ministry in the government here in Ontario. Both of you guys are so well respected and anticipated. Your views on your shows go longer than anybody else's, just so you know. Maybe people are waiting to hear your stress meter at the end of the show. I'm not sure. Welcome back, guys. There's so much to get to today, but off the top, before we start, I just want to say the outpouring of support for the Oshow in the last couple of weeks since we went 3 days a week has been huge. And many people from Quebec and BC and Alberta and all over the place have told us that this is now a go-to for them, that they need to check in with the Oshow every time it airs to see what's going on. So because of that love and support, and of course, we're spending more time on the show now as an independent product. So we wanted to have a way to bring us even more closely together as a community and also to support the work of this program, this pro-democracy program. So yes, we are launching the Oshow store. We are launching Oshow merchandise. It is going to be ready for purchase. And the best part about it, took me a couple of weeks to find it, 100% Canadian made, not just Canadian sourced, not just Canadian distributed, but Canadian made products. So it took some time and they are slightly more expensive than the cheap stuff you can get from other places. But you know what? This is the Oshow and we are all about Canada, 100% made in Canada, and so will our merchandise be. So stay tuned. You're going to see it soon, and then you're going to be able to purchase it and give it as gifts and keep promoting Canada. And yes, of course, we're going to have a Canadian flag on it. All right. So guys, that being said, I have had a very, very tough week, no sleep, because of what's going on with Greenland and the escalating rhetoric and that White House meeting where Denmark and Greenland foreign ministers showed up and were told by Rubio and Vance that the U.S. intends to conquer Greenland. They were, it even left the foreign minister in tears in the press conference. That's pretty dystopic. It's pretty horrific, that and watching the escalating war on America's own citizens by this fascist regime in Minneapolis has been devastating to watch. But this morning, there is news that is actually putting a little spring in my step. And that is that despite all of and we'll get into it, oh no, big deal, Carney to China, or the MAGA sphere freaking out, Carney going to China, communism, right? As though if Polyev were prime minister and went and opened up trade with China, they'd be like, yeah, Polyev, Trudeau was an idiot, let's go. Because it's Carney, yeah. They're like, communism, right? What I freaking love about this is the announcement about not just the trade, but the way the world is describing this. So we heard Mark Carney say this is a new world order of multilateralism, right? He said the U.S. ruptured the relationship with Canada. He said it out loud, the new world order, establishing Carney once and for all as the leader of the free world. And he's being characterized as such by Americans, right? But also the acknowledgement by analysts around the globe that Canada is now an agricultural superpower. We are responsible for 50% of the world's food, and the potash that comes out of our country and the top quality grain. For years, we were using the US to get it to market because we didn't have good ports. And now with the investment Carney's making in the Port of Churchill, it takes the US out of the equation. They lose all that passive income because they would mark it up every time it went through a port or a train or whatever to get to market. Port of Churchill, big ice cutters up there in the north, way faster. It takes 6 days off of global shipping times, which is massive when you're sending out commodities. And now that China is back into buying bigger stuff because we've reduced the tariff on EVs, it is a game changer. They are now saying that Canada not just has soft power, but we have hard power because Mark Carney looked at the situation and said, why are we doing it this way? We don't need to be paying the middleman in the US. Let's get it to market ourselves. Absolutely monumental in terms of Canada's position on the world stage. And if China, for all their rhetoric, is now relying on Canada for massive amounts of new product, they are not going to be a big fan of the US trying to take over Canada or our shipping routes because now it's not in their interest for Canada to be working for the US. So That's where I'm starting. I know it's a lot. And we can get to Legault, of course, resigning in Quebec. And we can also, of course, get to, Iran, if you guys want to, Doug Ford in Ontario with his idiotic comments of the week. But let's start with you, Keith. Can we dive right into, I think, what is a game-changing moment for Canada and the world if you're listening to global analysts?
Absolutely. This deal with China is massive. I mean, it's exactly what we need. If we're not going to be trading with our next door neighbor, the United States, the largest market, who's next? Who are we going to deal with? And this is where ideology goes out the window, and we look for economic ways of making things better for everybody. It's a real questionable deal. There's some risk to it, certainly for Carney in angering Doug Ford in Ontario by inviting in these EVs, taking the 100% tariff on Chinese-made electric vehicles, which we did to match, go in lockstep with the United States, and Mexico did the same. Here's us breaking from that, taking it down to the favored nations tariff rate, I think 6%, 6.1, something like that. That's going to flood, Doug Ford is right, that's going to flood the Canadian market with 50,000 cheap Chinese-made EVs a year. They sell for less than $35,000. Yeah. And they're pretty good vehicles, longer distance than anything made here. So there's a risk to the Canadian auto manufacturing sector, but it's secondary to the risk already posed by Ford, General Motors, and Stellantis, just basically saying Donald Trump wants us to move to the United States, our production, and they're doing it. Right. So the Canadian auto sector in Ontario, mostly based, was already at huge risk. Yeah. I don't know how much the Chinese EV is it's not going to help, because every vehicle sold now, is going to hurt the Canadian, if it's not made in Canada with no Canadian content, that's going to hurt the Canadian auto sector. But I think, as I say, it was already hugely at risk. And if they can pivot to EVs and compete with the Chinese EVs that come in cheaper, our governments, both federal and provincial, invested heavily in the battery manufacturing, got Volkswagen on side. I mean, so is there a future here for EVs? Absolutely. Does it have to be Chinese-made EVs? I mean, Doug Ford, it's not surprising, as you say, what he was going to react. What did he say? China now has a foothold in the Canadian market, and they're going to use it to full advantage and to discriminate against or to hurt Ontario and Canadian workers. He's probably right in the short term, but Carney had to look at this at a much bigger scale. And of course, we're talking about two perhaps separation referendums in Canada in the next year, Quebec and Alberta. So Western Canada was looking to see what Carney was going to do here. Mm-hmm. Scott Moe sitting right beside him, watching very, very closely and saying nothing. Wouldn't even speak to reporters. He's just letting Carney do the. He's there. He wasn't too keen, I think, on the New World Order comments, because it's a bit risky, that comment, to some people. But I think Moe was there because that's what Carney knew he needed to do. Yeah. Was to show Western Canada, okay, it's not going to be all just, Central Canada running away with everything again. We're going to make sure that whatever happens here is played out fairly. We're going to help Ontario as much as we can. But yes, this is going to help the prairies in particular. It's going to help Saskatchewan greatly.
Just a couple points before I jump to you on this, Mark. Yeah, Scott Moe being there. I mean, talk about Carney working with the West, right? He understands it. And while Alberta separatists are still, frothing up and, getting funded by Americans and all that stuff to rip apart our country, you've got Carney building us an economic powerhouse. And having Scott Moe there was important. And just as a small little note in terms of, stagecraft and whatnot, I loved watching the coverage of the meetings between the Canadian team and the Chinese team when Xi was at the table, because there you had on the one side, almost all men with China and I think one woman. And then on the Canadian side, you had Carney, and he was sitting in between Melanie Joly and Anita Anand. And then you had, I think it was Moe and the others and other women, and just the diversity of Canada in terms of gender representation, in terms of our culture. I thought it was beautiful to see and remarkable. It was when the camera tried to go to see Carney's reactions to Xi, Carney was sitting back. And so you saw Anita and Melanie Joly leaning in, right? Like, Carney doesn't need to go around and bloviate in front and brag. And, if you're about it, you don't need to talk about it. He is a strength on the globe. He's a leader, and he doesn't need the headlines, because his work is getting the headlines. So kudos to Mark Carney for making Canada look good. And damn, did we dodge a bullet in Poilievre. None of this would be happening if we had gone with Poilievre. We'd be the 51st state. I believe that to my core. One other thing before I go to you, Mark. When Doug Ford said that, I'm totally against Carney doing this, like so much for Captain Canada, because of the EV deal. And also, it's going to make it harder to do trade with Donald Trump. Really? This from the guy who didn't ask us, spent, $100 million of our money putting an ad about Reagan and tariffs in the U.S. market and stopped our trade negotiations with Trump? Now Doug Ford thinks that he can tell Carney what the fuck to do? I mean, please. He lost all credibility as Captain Canada, all credibility as a guy who understands macroeconomics and trade, and he has no say anymore in anything to do with U.S. relations, especially when he told people the other day when the weather warms up to go visit the States. F that. Mark?
I think what a lot of people are missing in this, I feel like when Carney is, his work is really forward thinking. It's not a moment in time. So when I think about the deal with the Chinese electric vehicles, okay, you can already buy BYD vehicles in Mexico. They're already for sale. You can buy them. They're quite. But what I think about is I'm putting together the massive investments that this government has made in electric battery manufacturing. And then I think, as we see, as you pointed out, the American automaking companies are basically telling us to fuck off, and we're going to do whatever Trump tells us. And then I think, if so, it's 50,000 cars. Like, I mean, come on, that's not a lot of cars. It's really a small amount to bleed into the market. But what if it becomes China investing in electric car plants in Ontario, employing Ontario workers, and now we have and I think, one of the things that struck me the most about Carney made a comment, and this is what I think speaks to it. He said, he's taking questions from reporters after the meeting with Z. Carney said Canada's relationship with China has become more predictable than its relationship with the United States. I think this is a brilliant play. Not only does it fuck Musk and his shitty ass cars that he sells in this market for overpriced cars, but this is an opportunity for Canada to tie one massive investment that we've already made in electric battery, and then China sees a market here for its vehicles, just like Korea has done and other countries have done. They make investments to sell the product here because it'd be cheaper for them to build the cars here than it would be to ship them across the ocean. So I think this is a huge power play. It's a real signal to the United States and to the auto manufacturers that if you're not gonna respect the Canadian workers and the ingenuity that we've had in building cars for decades, then we're going to look for new partners. And that's why I think this deal, there was so few expectations that Carney would come away with anything. I think I watched
by you were saying before we got on here, by a certain CBC panel, I think it was.
Last night I was watching Ad Issue and they were like, nothing's going to come of this. This is just performative, blah, 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 blah,
I'm
blah.
so sick of that, like the intellectual class and the media class. We'll get to fascism in a second, but in Germany in the 1930s, they didn't believe that it could never happen, blah, 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 blah. I'm so sick of this attitude of, because we haven't seen it before, because we lack imagination, and because we think we look cool by being, blasé. Like, that is not good analysis. Anybody who knew the stakes in this moment and how much China liked meeting Carney at UNGA, right, in the fall, he already had reset things. This was going to be a working meeting, and he's not a guy who fucks around. Carney treats things like a business CEO, long-term profitability and sustainability for his company, which happens to be Canada right now. He doesn't look at it like a politician who's concerned about election cycles. He's not looking for the quick wins and the praise. He's looking for how to build Canada as a superpower, which is what he said and what he just did in terms of our agriculture. Mark, continue.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, don't overlook the importance of the soybean deal. That is a massive win for Canadian farmers, especially in the West, who lost their market, 100% lost their market, 100% tariffs. And if you contrast that with what's going on in the States, where the soybean farmers down there have no market for their product right now, we have now become the preferred choice for one of the biggest markets in the world for soybeans. And our farmers will benefit this. And I hope that this resonates. I really do, because I know that there's this anti-liberal bias that seems to permeate through the West, and every time like the pipeline, this deal, it's showing the West it's not a liberal thing. It's a Carney thing. It's a man who is not parochial, who is putting the best interest of every region of this country, because not only we also got the lobsters and everything else was all in this deal. Everybody benefited from this deal, and that no one thought was going to happen, and that we were all, oh well, we better not do anything to piss off the United States. Look, Carney said it in the election. Those days are over. We are not. And Doug Ford's comments to me say that he's still holding out hope that we're going to get back to the old way of doing business, which is Canada, the United States, and fuck everybody else. Carney's like, no, man, no, sorry, bro. Like that, those days are done, and he means it. And that sends a strong political signal to Washington. That you think we're kidding around? You think we're fucking around? We're not.
Isn't Hegseth's favorite expression, fuck around and find out? Fafo? Yeah. Well, you know what? They just got fafoed. The U.S. just got fafoed by Carney. And Carney approached it as a good business leader does. He walked in and said, okay, I'm going to look at everything. I'm going to ask why. Why are we doing it this way? Why have we done it this way? Why are we paying a middleman in U.S. logistics output? Why aren't we leveraging this? Why are we closing down this opportunity? I mean, he went through it. It's been a year, and he's bringing in the goods. I think he's doing a stellar job. And I want to move to Greenland and stuff, guys, but I just want to say, I look forward to having coming up on the Oshow very soon, Ron Foxcroft. For those of you who might know Ron, he's not just the inventor of Fox 40 whistles, but he is also the owner of Fluke Transport. He does a ton of work in the U.S. He's been affected and publicly spoken about these tariffs in the media. And he was also a referee for the NBA for many, many years. So he knows the U.S. very, very well. And he's going to be on the Oshow in the next couple of weeks. And so I cannot wait to hear what Ron thinks about this deal, about Carney's performance. I don't know what political party Ron is from, but I know that we're going to get the goods from him in terms of Canada-U.S. relations. So stay tuned for that. Okay, guys, I do want to pivot to Greenland because, as I mentioned off the top, if in fact China is what they said about a stable, growing relationship with Canada, if they see great value in these changes and access to our resource market and our food market. And to your point about the, maybe they will build in Canada. That's why I want to go with the Gripin deal that's being offered to us instead of buying more U.S. military aircraft. Because, I mean, Trump joked about a kill switch. He's threatening allies. I mean, why would we buy a single piece of equipment for our military from the U.S. if we don't have to, right? So, I mean, Gripin wants to invest here as well, 10,000 Canadian jobs. So, I mean, we're on the right track economically as a country, and it makes me very, very happy because we have real problems and we need real solutions, and it looks like Carney's delivering that. But let's talk about NATO. I want to start with you on this one, Mark. As you watch the escalating rhetoric and the drumbeats of war and seeing Germany and France and Finland and others bringing in their troops to Greenland, where is your mind at? I mean, are you freaking out? Are you thinking that finally NATO's got the goods on Trump and understands the moment?
I think it is somewhat performative, and I think that's why I'm glad that Carney didn't fall into the trap of like people here saying we need to put troops there. Again, Europe, it's a European, Greenland is part of Denmark. It's a European response that we need, and so I think it's sending like less than 100 troops, like it's not a big thing, but it's very symbolic. And the rhetoric that's coming out, that meeting with the with the Greenland and Denmark foreign ministers the other day, what an embarrassing situation. Honestly, every day it's just another embarrassing situation. And Trump offering each Greenlander like $100,000, like it's just like it's. I don't think personally, I mean, it scares the shit out of me that the U.S. would invoke this kind of saber rattling rhetoric about invading, however we're going to get it, the good way or the easy way or the hard way. And I think a lot of people see the hypocrisy in all of this in the fact that there's been an agreement with Greenland since for over 50 years where the U.S. can have as many soldiers and as many bases and as many stuff on Greenland as they want. So if it's about security, they already have those things. What I worry about, and you mentioned not sleeping. Like it's been tough to fall asleep at night because my brain is just like, what the fuck is going on? What is going on? And again, Epstein files. Don't forget. But what caught me was I saw a poll yesterday, and I think this epitomizes the split in this country. And this poll was done by I forget Main Street or somebody. And I thought if Canada were to face a situation and where the United States threatened military action against Canada's territory, what would be your response? Okay. 47% of conservatives said that we should basically lay down our arms and try to work out a deal. Right? Instead of like 73% of liberals said we're going to fight till the last man. And I think this is a huge like I watch all these people try to defend, themselves and their idiotic and crazy opinions about Carney and Canada and everything else, and yet, or they invoke the military. They put a lest we forget, thing on their profile, like they're for veterans, and yet they're the first people that would fucking lay down and be walked over if the United States. What happened to this country? We're always a country that defended ourselves, that would fight for the beauty that this is Canada, for the special privilege that it is to live in this country, and we have 50% of conservatives that would lay down. Holy shit, like that scares me in that in Greenland, everybody's like, fuck you, man, we'll fight to the last person. But here in Canada, we've got a welcome committee of conservatives at the fucking border.
I have a theory, and I want to get to you on what you think of that, Keith. My theory is this. A lot of Canadian business people, conservatives, many of them, and I've had some conversations recently with them, have always considered their success in Canada as being not as satisfying as if they are successful in the US, right? They really, really, really want to be successful in the US. They really, really want American business people to think that they're powerful. And there's this inferiority complex towards American business that a lot of Canadian business owners seem to feel, or business people. I get a ton of attacks on LinkedIn, more than other places when I post Oshow content, because I think they both want to suck up to the US because they're integrated to their markets. I understand that, right? There's a bottom line implication in a trade war. I get that. But they also want to be seen to be powerful, right? They want to suck up to the US. And so the idea of, well, if it means going to war and having to do the terrible things to defend our sovereignty, or I could be an American and I could have access to American markets and I could be seen as just as good as Americans, forgetting the fact that any hostile regime that takes a country does not treat the conquered as equals, okay? I had a business person say, well, will they pay us? Like, has Trump ever paid anybody he's promised in 80 years? No money's going to come. No advantages are going to come. No, profile build is going to come. You are going to be vanquished underfoot, because that's what predators who call themselves predators do. They do not take their victims and say, oh, you're on equal footing with me, the predator. They tramp on you. They take everything from you. They exploit you. Look at Puerto Rico. I mean, you think that they're treated equally? Like, what the hell are Canadian business people thinking, who are thinking that we don't need to diversify, that we don't need to stand up to America? I mean, rule number one in business, when I'm in business, when I go to, into a deal, I don't roll over. Talk to my poor suppliers of everything, and multiple conversations, because I'm looking for an equal partnership, win-win, all that good stuff, right? The US is no longer a good trading partner in good faith, not with the Trump regime in place. So we have to diversify. So my theory is part of that rollover number you're seeing is either that idea of, well, if I have to be American, that's okay. And the other one being the wimpification of conservatives with this MAGA grievance movement. I mean, they have become the snowflakes of Canada. It's unbelievable how sensitive they are to everything. I used to think of conservatives as being like tough. They knew what they were for. They were for low taxes and less government interference and personal blah, blah, blah. And now it's like, freak out, insult, freak out, insult. I'm watching them going, you guys, I used to thought you had the onions. Now you guys are like, no, now the onions are making them cry. For those of you listening, you missed Mark. He gave me the perfect cue there of the onion analogy and where I could take it. Absolutely. They went from having onions to crying all the time from the onions. So funny. Keith?
I would have thought that poll number was way out of whack. I really would, that many conservatives. But I have a very close conservative friend, long time, decades-long conservative friend. And we were discussing it this week, and he told me he would be the first one to welcome Donald Trump at the border. I told him I would be the first one to turn him into the resistance. Yeah. Because that's what we will have. We can't fight them on military terms. We know that. Yeah. But there would be a resistance, and a really deep, damn resistance, widespread. And I have a strong feeling many, many conservatives would quickly join that resistance as well. Yep. It's been hard for us as Canadians to define ourselves, living, Trudeau summed it up well, living next to the elephant, and every time it twitches or moves, we feel it. But one of the things that we did define ourselves was we're just not like you. We're that little bit different. The Europeans say we're the unarmed Americans, but it's so much more than that. We have a different sensibility about so many things. And it's not just the healthcare, which is a huge issue, but it's who we're, all of this is part of the Canadian identity. And it does make us distinctly different from the United States. And I think that we're pushed that even conservatives would come on board. No. We are a distinct democracy. We must have our own. And what we've been witnessing in the United States is so anti-democratic as to why would anyone want to have that exported to our country? I really, truly don't understand that. I understand the desire for independence, and I understand the desire to break away from, a central government that hasn't treated you the way you want to be treated. But let's be realistic. Do you think you're going to get better treatment from Trump's White House than you'd ever get from Carney in Ottawa or from Canada as a whole? Canada does look out for ourselves. I mean, this deal wasn't just about the canola and the potash. There was the lobsters and the peas, and also, this is important, and it opens up $3 billion worth of Canadian exports to the Chinese market. That's massive. That's exactly what we need at this point. So I know I've circled it back around and away from Greenland, but that was good. When Carney said that China was more predictable now, well, what do businesses want? They want predictability. Right. That means China is more reliable now.
Right.
Yeah. That's a signal to the world that we can do business with them, because yes, they have very strict rules about how things are going to be done and how they're going to be done, and the state subsidizes and all this sort of stuff. But we know what their rules are. They're very firm. They're going to stick to them. Whereas Trump, we don't know one day to the next. And it's been that way his entire first term and for the whole first year of his second term. So he is not reliable, and therefore he's not predictable. And so this is what businesses want. So I think Carney's on the right move, making this deal with China. On the whole,
so go ahead.
I was just going to say, pivot to Greenland and just say, this appears to be more of Trump's, let's just be in the news 5 times a day with everything. I can't believe in my heart. Of course, I've said this about his actions before, but I can't believe in my heart that he really would attack and destroy NATO, because that's what it would be. It would be the end of NATO. And maybe he does want that. And he does believe he owns all of North and South America, or at least should control it. And if he does want that, that's going to be more than a new world order. It's going to be a new world disorder. It's going to mean, wars all over the place and economic fights and who knows what kind of disasters we lead. So I guess it's a strong hope more than a desire that he just, he's using this as a way of staying in the news, of keeping the Epstein files out of the news, because there were some more file documents released this week, transcripts of some of the victims, and holy cow, horrific. You can't even imagine the type of horror show that you don't want to think about it. So there's a reason he's doing this. He's very good at distracting and staying in the news, and that's what he's doing. I mean, God, having a news conference with a jug of whole milk on his table, uprooting the food pyramid, all this stuff. No one can keep up with all this stuff, and at the same time, he's going to invade Greenland. What? Oh, so I'm hopefully it's just part of his distraction campaign. But
I don't think it is, and I'll tell you why. Because I was listening to Susan Glasser, who interviewed Trump years ago for a book, and he brought up wanting Greenland then, and she said, why? And he said, well, when you look on a map, it's all about real estate. He says, it's like the corner store that we're missing. He goes, I like the look of it, I want to have it. So this was years ago. And according to the first administration, a bunch of people have come out and said he talked about it all the time. This is not just an Epstein file distraction. This is the real deal for him. But speaking of China, you remember when Nixon opened China, right? That whole big deal back in the day. Nixon also had a theory of the madman president, right? The mad president, where he'd keep the world off guard because you wouldn't know what he would do. It's not a theory with Trump. He is legit crazy as a fox, meaning he's nuts, but he's also very cunning and very vicious. And Epstein, didn't he say he found Trump to be the most evil person he'd ever met? I mean, this coming from the world's biggest pedophile. I mean, so what we're dealing with is terrifying. It's easy to mock, let's mock Trump all day long. He falls asleep. Apparently he smells like stale roast beef. Apparently he's like a complete joke. And to the Ford worker who got Trump to give him the finger, what an excellent way of exposing just what a vulgar, horrible human being Trump is, and how much he's worried about the Epstein files. Did I say the Epstein files? The Epstein files. Did I say the Epstein files? How worried he is about the Epstein files, that he flipped the bird at a union worker who, by the way, got 800,000 or some huge amount of GoFundMe and said, stop giving me the money, guys, give it somewhere else to another good cause. So Keith, to your point, I think it's more than I do think it's more than a distraction. And next Wednesday, we have on the Oshow podcast, we're going to have a thought leader from Finland who's going to be on the show. Wow. So I can't wait, because I want to get their perspective from over there. I think the world is seeing Canada as more than just Americans without guns now that Carney's on the stage, right? They always thought we were nice with Trudeau, had good values. But now they're going, wow. Agricultural superpower, right? World soft power, most respected nation on earth. Carney, one of the most respected leaders globally, partly because he hasn't been politically tarnished like Macron might have been, or Kears, or these other leaders. But also because everyone respected him before he took the gig, which is why Canadians were like, hell yeah, I don't care what party I vote for. Let's get this guy in. To your comment about would conservatives actually fight or become part of the resistance? I mean, I think the biggest way that we fight invasion by the US is economically, right? We make so many trade deals that there are so many invested partners and allies that do not want us messed with because it cuts their supply chain. I think that's our power here. And I think that, the idea of a resistance coming up, sure. I mean, I've heard from conservatives, former military people who are like, this is not about Carney, this is not about the liberals, right? This is about our sovereignty, like big picture guys. So I have to believe that's possible. But since you brought up a resistance, I want to pivot now to Minneapolis, because I saw a disturbing video from a former Marine or a former U.S. service person who said, there is going to be an insurgency, a military insurgency, if this ICE stuff goes on much longer. In other words, there are a whole bunch of heavily armed veterans who are not part of these white supremacist militias or white supremacist groups that attacked the Capitol and ended up getting all these ICE jobs. I mean, who's behind the mask guys? Probably the guys from January 6th. There's a whole bunch of former military in the U.S. who are getting sick and tired of seeing U.S. citizens being dragged out of vehicles and beaten up, and pregnant women getting dragged in the streets, and a woman getting shot in the head, right? We all know that was murder. So I'm concerned not just about the people of Minneapolis. It's terrifying, and Trump wants to do the Insurrection Act to get in there. But I'm also concerned about an insurrection in the U.S. or civil war. I mean, where is your head at, Mark, with the state of the U.S.? And just before we leave the Greenland thing, I just want to say, solidarity, of course, to Denmark and to Greenland and to every country, because I think they realize now this is not just a hemispheric prowess coming out of Trump. He doesn't just want the hemisphere. They threatened Iceland, right? They're going to threaten anyone they want to anywhere in the world, and we all need to see that. So we are definitely keeping an eye on it. But Mark, where are you with what's happening U.S. domestically?
You remember before Christmas, when I went on a bit of a rant about we're coming for you and that the tide is turning and that people have had enough? I I think we've reached that point. I knew we reached that point. I knew it was already happening. And I think what we're seeing in Minneapolis with is that Trump is goading this. And I think it's going to backfire on him because it's not just in Minneapolis, it's across the United States now where you see people coming out to these protests, these rallies now who've never been to one before. They look like, if you put them in a lineup, you think some of these people, you would say, oh, they voted for Trump. And they're not. They're just regular, ordinary people who have had a fucking enough of this shit. And this is what scares the extreme right so much. And this is why they backlash so much when we say this, because they know that they're running out of fucking time, right? And that all of this bullshit that they're throwing around, people are good people, which is 90% of us, right? And I'm not saying even Trump voters who, maybe voted for him because they thought he was going to be, lower the prices of eggs, whatever, aren't evil, mean, terrible people who want to see people brutalized on the street, are probably now going, oh, Jesus. And so I see, it scares me absolutely that people would take up arms. Right. And I think that we need to remain as peaceful as we possibly can in these times, because that is the greatest power against evil, is good and peaceful. And what are they going to do? Are they going to mow us all down? Are they going to shoot us all down? They'll never get away with it. So I think what you're seeing, and I think Trump has made a huge miscalculation with Minneapolis, because he's poked that spear right into the heart of where people were at with sort of like, I've had enough. I've had enough of this hate. I've had enough of this anger. And now you're seeing people mobilize, and people are, this is beautiful to watch. It's unfortunate that we had to get to this point, but I really, this is the only good, Renee Good being murdered is such a tragic thing, but she will be historically remembered as the person who gave up her life, who sacrificed her life for the end of the right-wing extremist movement.
Wow.
Well,
You know what? Wow, you gave me chills. The reality is that the videos coming out of Minneapolis don't look like a bunch of foreign aliens or the worst of the worst getting dragged in the streets. They're Midwestern white people.
Yeah.
And it's not lost on anyone that she was a blonde, white soccer mom who just dropped off her child, right? I mean, the MAGA is trying to make it about she's a lesbian terrorist or whatever, but we all know what we saw, and we're not quite in 1984 Orwell just yet, no matter how much they try to tell us that we should ignore what we're seeing. And I think you make an excellent point about, they can't mow us all down. But Keith, Kristi Noem, when she did one of her press conferences this week, had a Nazi saying on the podium. As somebody who
one
has
of us, all of yours. Yeah.
That's right. And as someone who has run many events and press conferences, what you put on the podium, let alone the step and repeat or whatever's behind the podium, what you put on the podium is the message. So for her to put a Nazi thing, one of ours, all of yours, which as I understand it was when a SS person, a soldier, was killed. And so they went into the village and they killed everybody, because of that. That's where it comes from. So, they're signaling that we are willing to kill all of you. And that if you are disrespectful, if that nasty
Disrespectful
woman,
protester.
right. If you're a protester and you're disrespectful, that's a capital crime now in the United States of America. So nobody should go to the World Cup. No Canadian should travel there. They have detained over 100 Canadians. One died in their custody. Nobody should be going into the U.S. anytime soon. And so, Keith, when you look at what's happening in Minneapolis in the U.S., what are your thoughts? I mean, I don't want to date you, but I remember hearing about Kent State as a child, and I remember hearing about the stuff going on in the late 60s. I was born in 72. How do you look at this in terms of what you've understood to be the U.S.?
Well, it's a whole new world. It really is coming out of Washington and the United States that we're seeing all over it. But I think that there's a line from an old movie, and it was about adultery at the time, but it applies to what we're seeing, especially in Minneapolis. Who are you going to believe, me or your lying eyes? Because that's what they came to us with. No. This guy is internal bleeding. She aimed the car at him, and we've all seen the frame by frame. So it's so much analysis and frame by frame, and the backup lights on, the wheel turn this way, that way. No. As you say, we've got Kristi Noem out there. You injure one of us, we kill all of you. With an out-and-out nasty slogan on the podium, a selection of different hats, which all appear to be, really stylish. This woman is a performative nutbar. Yeah. Out there convicted this victim as a domestic terrorist right out the gate before any evidence, before like the first minutes afterwards. And that's typical of that government. Everyone in that government supports her, and they all act the same way without any evidence. It's just, they went so far in criticizing the mayor of Minneapolis end of a White House statement, they had in there, blah, 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 I forget the mayor's name, comma, who is Jewish, comma, blah, 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 blah. They had to retreat. They took that down quickly. But that's their heart. That's their mindset. There are some true, actual Nazis in there, and they're not just signaling, they're openly putting signs up.
Yes.
These open Nazi slogans. Do you not think these Aryan freaks know all their Nazi slogans? You could go, there's a lot of code, 88 and HH and all, there's all kinds of shit. No, this is blatant out Nazi sloganism in front of the secretary.
Yeah.
Holy
and
cow.
Stephen Miller, who they say is the most powerful person in the Trump regime, did a Nazi speech almost verbatim at Charlie Kirk's funeral memorial, right? So, I mean, there is no more
Stephen
denial.
Miller, who's Jewish, by the way. Yeah. Stephen Miller, who's Jewish, by the way.
Right.
Just
I mean,
for the record.
Yeah,
but it's the line in the constant, and we saw it this week. We've seen it in the last few weeks that the billionaire taking over CBS and then directing a new leader at CBS News and killing 60 Minutes pieces. And CBS News puts out, there's video showing that the cop who shot and killed Ms. Good was internal bleeding, and there's all this. And the reaction, I love the reaction online. CBS News, we can't trust you anymore. We don't believe you anymore.
Did you see the sign off of their new anchor? When their new anchor in Florida said, "We salute you, Secretary Rubio." I mean, they lost all, it went full on police state fascist regime when they signed off. Like they are no longer, it was a whole buyout.
Yeah, totally.
Following what's going on in U.S. media, basically now pro-Trump fascists own a bunch of the stations now, own a bunch of the social media. I'm going to have on A Canada, I think it's called, and there are social media sites in Canada that are coming up that want to be on the show to move away from the U.S. Massive ownership of these things. But the media, I promised off the top we talk about, guys, and then we'll quickly end on Quebec. But the media ownership in Canada is an incredibly important topic that we need to have a discussion on right now, because there is a U.S. hedge fund that owns Post Media, that owns many, 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 many newspapers, including major national and daily newspapers in this country. And if you have been watching their coverage in the last few days, they are making rationales for why the U.S. should have Greenland, which is an existential threat to NATO. Only Putin benefits from that, and it's what Trump wants. They're making excuses for that, trying to soften our natural, obvious resistance to the U.S. taking over a sovereign country by force. And they are also bringing up the whole red thread of China. Instead of saying these deals are going to be good for Canadian West, right, in terms of potash and grain and soybean and everything else, are going to be good for the East in terms of that, going to be good for oil sector. Instead of saying what Canadians are looking at it going, okay, in a trade deal, there's obviously some downsides. There's obviously some risks with China. But you know what? Our number one trading partner turned on us and threatened us. Of course, we're going to go to our number two trading partner. There's no perfect trading partner in the world. There's no perfect country or business to do deals with. There's always risk in a trade relationship. But the U.S. started this war. Canada doesn't start wars, but we've never lost one. And we're not going to lose this trade war, not with Mark Carney, a top global economist, running our country, and Canadians firmly behind him, in spite of the MAGA annexation threatening rhetoric that is coming through Canadian newspapers. You have to look at who owns the media you're reading, whether it's online or in hard copy, and say to yourself, is this headline in the best interest of Canada? Maybe I should listen to some 100% Canadian sources, like independent shows like the Oshow, or independent media that are doing really good investigative journalism that are 100% Canadian. Our country is under attack. The ground war, I hope, never happens. The air war has 100% started. It's a long-term plan. We sold out our sovereignty in terms of our media ecosphere a long time ago, and they are taking full advantage. And Sherry DeNovo said something that alarmed me so much, I didn't even cut a clip on it yet, where she said, we won't need to pick up our guns, guys. To our earlier conversation, they're just going to call in their chits at Post Media and other places and convince Canadians to lie down. So, we better be aware of that. I'd love to hear from you both on this topic, and then we'll get to Quebec, because you spent more time in the media than I think I have. So, Keith, what's your thought on foreign ownership and what Canada needs to do about it?
Well, stop subsidizing for start. The subsidies for Canadian newspaper and news organizations were coming in just as I was retiring from full-time work in the mid-2010s. And I didn't, I spent a decade in management, and I know how tight the budgets were, but I still I still don't accept the idea that the government should fund media, reporters in particular, to keep them in business. Yeah. But I couldn't see another business case either, and we were losing a lot of media outlets. So I'm still not sure what the correct answer is there, but I do know that 100% we should not be subsidizing media that aren't 100% Canadian owned, or at least 90%, whatever, some figure. But to have this Chatham Investment, whatever the company is out of New Jersey, that owns a hell of a lot of daily and weekly newspapers in this country, And people complain that, the Biden and them used to control the media. You see all the same story. Well, that's because they're all on the same network. Well, these are basically like watching the same TV network. You're going to watch the same headline in every city right across the country. Our cities are on fire, the crime, our cities are, and you'll see that from Halifax to Vancouver, where they own both daily papers. So
Yeah.
it's really, really a difficult media landscape for anyone to navigate at this point. So you're thinking about looking for independent journalists, looking for people local, but make sure that local, it may even have a local name of something that was an established news organization for decades. Now it's been just supplanted by something else online and has nothing to do with what that original name was. You've got to be careful. There's a lot of scam news sites essentially pretending to be something they are not. And they are message driven and they are agenda driven and they are paid to drive those agendas, especially this whole Alberta separation bullshit.
Yes.
There's American money coming in big time to push that kind of narrative in our media that we're paying government subsidies for. So as I say, I'm still not sure how the government should play out the whole subsidizing the media. I don't know where to land on that because I don't have the smarts to come up with a business case to keep them alive. But I definitely know we don't need to be subsidizing American hedge funds that own Canadian media sites.
Mark, there is good news that I think CBC, there's an investment in CBC to open, I think I saw like 16 new bureaus across the country or hire reporters, some investment anyway, so that we have some sort of other alternative for people in mainstream. What are your thoughts on this? And then I'm going to close off, guys, with a quick thought on Quebec and your stress meter. Mark?
I'll try to make this quick, just because I could go on for a while about what happened to the media and specifically the print media in this country. As someone who worked in it for 25 years, but the writing was on the wall a long time ago. The internet killed print advertising, and a lot of papers failed, and they just couldn't. There was no way to create revenue, and so we had this. What was left was bought up by these U.S. capital firms. But what I find the most ironic is that, you hear people on the right, extreme right, fucking media, liberal bias, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, we've known this forever. This is not a new story. The percentage of media in this country that's owned by U.S. companies, the percentage of media in this country that show a conservative bias far, far outweighs this perception that somehow the media are all liberal. So, fuck off. Are you really that stupid? Are you really that stupid? I think that now is the best
I
time
have a
ever.
feeling you're going to get a wee bit of pushback on that.
I hope so. Good. I mean, honestly,
Coming.
it's like open your fucking eyes, right? Like stop retweeting, and these people are being fed these narratives, right? And they're running with it, and they think it's true because they don't expand beyond Facebook, right? All their news comes from Facebook where it's being manipulated. We can't even have traditional media on there. I think that was a bad move by the Trudeau government, by the way. They should allow media
Thank
back.
God they're, because your Facebook video where you called them out, I think got 100,000 views on Facebook alone or something.
They're
Mark.
afraid of us.
My point
They're
is
afraid of
that,
us.
well, no, your particular one, I think, on that
I know.
one, because I do separate ones for each of you guys when you say something that I think is fire. But my point is that, we get millions of view clips. So everyone please subscribe and share, because that's how we break through. So if they're getting their news only from Facebook and they don't understand the truth, at least we're breaking through, right?
Yep.
At least this pro-democracy conversation with media experts like the two of you is breaking through. So let me just wrap it up on this, guys. Quick take on the Quebec Premier quitting. I'm going to try to get someone from Quebec on the pod soon to talk about it from their perspective over there. Is separation really a thing again? Or are they still pro-Carney, let's keep Canada together? I want to know how it looks on the ground there. Quick comment on that, and then your stress meter, and we'll wrap up. Keith?
Well, I'm not surprised to see the premier leave. He was once the most popular premier in Canada. Then soon enough, he was the least popular premier in Canada. And that's how Canada works,
Yeah.
So he read the writing on the wall. He wasn't going to be the leader in the next election, and especially when that election is going to be fought in part on separation.
Yeah.
So he made the right move for his party, for himself, for the province. I still have that hopeful federalist feeling that the majority of Quebecers will see staying in Canada is always to their best advantage, and it's to Canada's best advantage as well. It would just hurt both sides as opposed to staying right where they are. And, they have a pretty damn good deal in Canada, and I hope they realize that. And I know they do, actually. I'm pretty sure the majority of them do. So that's on that stress. Looking at that, my stress level very, very low. On the global scene, this whole Greenland thing is just so concerning. But again, to see Carney making the deal with China, and we've had so many other deals as well, we're positioned where we should be. We're knocking on the doors we need to be knocking on. And as you say, we seem to be garnering a little bit more respect with each one we do. So I'm pretty confident things are good. We're at a 5, 5 to 6, but got to keep an eye on Trump. You just got to keep an eye on Trump.
You are so steady. I love it. Mark?
I think Legault did Quebec a favor. I think he did the Liberal Party a favor, the Quebec Liberal Party a favor. We're going to have two new leader races, which are going to gobble up a lot of time. It's going to cut into the PQ lead, which I think was fake. It was just like it was like the Pierre,
Polyev.
Polyev
Park
thing, because people were just like trying to park their vote somewhere. And so I kudos to Legault. He had his warts and he did his best, and I thought his speech was gracious and I think that it's a real opportunity. 2/3 of Quebecers don't want a referendum on separation. So, in terms of stress, like I said, I don't know. I went through Christmas and I kind of just tried to stop like reading the media and just try to stop
Good luck.
digesting information and just enjoy myself. And then, January 5th came back to work, and I'm like nonstop, and it's just been the crazy show for like 10 days. It's just been crazy, crazy, crazy. So. I even had a conversation with my dad the other day, who, he was a conservative, but not a crazy conservative. And I said, like, I'm really worried that they're going to, like, would they invade us? Like, would they actually invade us? Like, I was thinking this, like, it was just seemed so like crazy that they, like, in this moment of time where they're just desperate to avoid the final nail in Donald Trump's coffin, which is going to be the Epstein files. They are just like scrambling to flood the zone and make us all anxious and create this, so much anxiety among us, right? And it's all deliberate. So I'm going to say, like, I think I'm more stressed out. I thought 2026 would be a better year. It's gotten off to a shitty start, and I'm more stressed than I was before Christmas. So, and let's not forget about Ukraine and the fact that no one's talking about Ukraine right now, which is absolutely
What Putin
just
wants.
devastating, right? As they continue the great fight for democracy in their country. So I'm at like 7-8 right now. So.
Yeah, you know what? I love hearing about your dad's thoughts on stuff. I used to bring up what my neighbor Tony Betelich would say, but as you all know, he passed away before Christmas.
Yeah.
I love hearing from different generations. So please keep bringing us those convos with your dad, Mark. And I know so many of the listeners out there and viewers are in their 70s, because I've heard from so many of you that you're willing to fight for the next generation, no matter what. There's no fear from that generation, from what I'm hearing. They're like,
My dad would be at the border with a gun if Donald Trump ever tried to invade this country.
I think I shared, if I didn't, a letter I got about a bunch of people. Someone overheard guys at a curling club, a bunch of seniors talking about how they would die on the front lines for their grandchildren at a curling club. It doesn't get much more Canadiana than that. So listen, my stress meter before the Carney announcement with China, in the sense that we have a new partner, even though it's risk, I'm probably closer to a 7, but I was hitting probably 9 watching some of that stuff this past week. I'm not kidding, guys.
I know.
Listen, stay tuned, because we've got excellent new guest on Monday, a new perspective. There's someone who contributes to the Toronto Star. You're going to want to hear from them. Wednesday, we're going to have, as I said, someone from Finland, and lots of other great guests lining up. I promise, when we went 3 days a week, we're going to keep bringing excellent perspectives. A lot of you loved Annie Koshy the other day. She was terrific. And of course, Spencer Fernando, a conservative, came on the Oshow, not afraid. So that's what it's about. It's about democracy. It's about country over party, damn it.
Yes.
And so stay tuned for that. And please share, subscribe, and tell us what you think. I literally look at every single comment on the YouTube page and try to respond to as many as I can. Thanks, guys. Have a wonderful weekend. And, Canada, we're killing it.
When you care about current affairs, it's on the Oshow. And when you want to get clear what's going on here, it's on the Oshow. If you like to stay in the know, tune yourself into the Oshow. It's the Oshow. Laura Babcock's the Oshow. And with a lot of great guests, she puts them to the test on the Oshow. Yeah, there's no doubt they'll be calling them out on the Oshow. You gotta stand for something or fall for it all. Canada, you hear the call of the Oshow. It's a podcast, the Oshow. Laura Babcock's the Oshow. Stay informed with the Oshow, Oshow.
Your merch bin.